Something shocking happened during Mass. An arrogant millionaire challenged faith, but suddenly started acting in a terrifying way. The priest was in shock when he witnessed what seemed to be a supernatural possession. See what happened. The bell of Holy Cross Church echoed through the small town of Riverdale as Richard Mitchell parked his black Mercedes-Benz on the side street. Wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit, he remained inside the car for a few minutes, his fingers nervously drumming on the leather steering wheel. Through the tinted glass, he observed the parishioners entering for the 6 o'clock Mass, simple people he usually ignored in his day-to-day life. Richard couldn't explain why he was there. For the past 30 years, he had dedicated his life exclusively to business, transforming a small construction supply store into the largest chain in the state. His name was synonymous with success, but also with harshness. Heart of stone, some said. Man without a soul, others whispered. He never cared about these comments until that afternoon. The day had begun like any other. Meetings, numbers, tough decisions. But during lunch, something strange happened. While savoring his filet mignon with Madeira sauce at the most expensive restaurant in town, his eyes fell on a table across the dining room. A woman of about 40 was having lunch with a girl who appeared to be around 12 years old. There was something familiar about that woman, something that deeply disturbed him. That's when the memory hit him like a punch to the stomach. Amanda Bennett Smith. 15 years ago, she worked as a manager in one of his stores. She was competent, dedicated, beloved by customers, but when Richard decided to close that location to build a shopping center there, she begged not to be fired. She was pregnant, had just separated, needed the job more than ever. Richard remembered his own words perfectly from that day. Business is business. I can't let sentimentality get in the way of progress. He fired her without hesitation, along with 30 other employees. At the time, it seemed just another necessary decision. Now, seeing that woman in the restaurant, was it really her? Something inside him began to crumble. He spent the entire afternoon restless in his 20th floor office. The glass walls offered a privileged view of the city, but for the first time he couldn't appreciate his empire. Images from the past began to surface in his mind. It wasn't just Amanda. It was dozens, hundreds of lives he had impacted over the years, always in the name of progress, always justifying his actions with the coldness of numbers. The sun was beginning to set when he made an impulsive decision. He grabbed his car keys and drove to the main church. He hadn't attended Mass since his mother's death, 25 years ago. She always said that church was a place of reflection, of meeting oneself. Richard always thought this was sentimental nonsense. Now something was pushing him there. The wooden pews were almost all occupied when he entered. He chose a spot in front, aware of the surprised looks from regular churchgoers. Father Anthony, an elderly man with grey hair who had served that parish for decades, also seemed astonished to see him there. The homily began, and the words about repentance and redemption seemed specifically directed at him. Richard felt cold sweat running down his back. His breathing became heavy, irregular. Years of repressed guilt, of denied humanity, began to weigh on his shoulders like an invisible cross. That's when he noticed movement at the back of the church. A small, solitary figure caught his attention. A girl, not very different from the one he had seen in the restaurant, was sitting alone in the last pew. There was something in her gaze that deeply disturbed him. It was as if she could see through him, as if she knew all his secrets. Richard felt his heart racing. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. The pressure in his chest increased with each second. He tried to stand up, but his legs failed him. The world began to spin. The voices of the parishioners transformed into a distant buzz. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the face of that mysterious girl, her eyes carrying wisdom far too ancient for her age. When he awoke, he was lying on the church pew, surrounded by concerned people. Father Anthony held a glass of water, while an elderly woman fanned his face with a Mass pamphlet. But the girl had disappeared. Richard got up unsteadily, ignoring requests for him to remain lying down. He needed to find her. He needed to understand why her presence had affected him so much. But upon reaching the church door, an even more disturbing revelation awaited him. A group of people were talking in low voices, and among them was a face he immediately recognized: Amanda Bennett Smith. She stared at him with an expression that mixed surprise and something else, something he couldn't decipher. And beside her, holding her hand, was a girl, the same girl he had seen at the restaurant, the same one who had been sitting in the last pew of the church. No, it couldn't be. Or could it? Richard felt the world spin again. But this time it wasn't just dizziness. It was the sensation that his life, carefully built on foundations of power and indifference, was about to completely collapse. Amanda held her daughter's hand firmly as she watched Richard Mitchell stagger at the church entrance. 15 years had passed, but the pain of that day remained vivid in her memory. The dismissal wasn't just the loss of a job. It was the beginning of a downward spiral that almost completely destroyed her life. The first months were the most difficult. 4 months pregnant, unemployed, and with savings rapidly dwindling, Amanda had to sell everything she owned. The small financed apartment, the furniture she had bought with such sacrifice, even the jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother. Each item sold was like a piece of her dignity being ripped away. Lily, her daughter, was born on a rainy March morning. Amanda was alone in the public hospital, unable to afford private health insurance. Complications during delivery almost cost her life, and doctors fought for hours to save mother and daughter. When she finally held that small being in her arms, Amanda made a silent promise. Her daughter would never go through the humiliations she was facing. Living as a guest in a former colleague's house, Amanda began looking for work as soon as Lily turned 2 months old. But doors closed one after another. Richard Mitchell's name was powerful in town, and having been fired from one of his companies was like carrying an invisible mark. Nobody wanted to risk hiring someone who might displease the businessman. "You need to start over somewhere else," her friend suggested after another failed job attempt. Amanda initially resisted. That town was her home, her history. Her roots were there. But looking at Lily, so small and dependent on her decisions, she understood she had no choice. With what little money she had left, she bought 2 bus tickets to New York. The metropolis frightened her, but it represented her only chance for reconstruction. The night before departure, she wrote a letter to her parents explaining her decision. They had moved to England years earlier, and pride had prevented her from telling them about her situation. Now, alone and desperate, she at least needed to leave a record of her whereabouts. The first years in New York were a constant struggle. She worked as a saleswoman, cleaner, receptionist, sometimes all 3 jobs simultaneously. Lily grew up under the care of neighbors, while her mother stretched herself to ensure their livelihood. Sleepless nights studying, weekends doing odd jobs, every penny saved with one goal: to give her daughter the education she herself never had. Gradually, her persistence began to bear fruit. A technical course in administration opened new possibilities. A promotion at work brought some financial relief. Lily grew up healthy and intelligent, top of her class, the pride of all her teachers. Amanda began to believe the worst had passed. But fate had other plans. 6 months ago, she received news that would change everything again. Her parents had died in an accident in England, leaving her a small inheritance, enough to start over, to give Lily a better life. And so, after 15 years, Amanda Bennett Smith returned to the town that had hurt her so much. She bought a modest house, enrolled Lily in the best school she could afford, and opened a small business, a craft store in the town center. Life finally seemed to be smiling at them. Until that afternoon when she saw Richard Mitchell at the restaurant. He didn't recognize her, of course. To men like him, people like her were invisible. And now there he was, staggering at the church door, looking at her and Lily as if he had seen a ghost. Amanda felt her daughter's grip tighten. Lily had always been a sensitive girl, capable of perceiving others' emotions with impressive clarity. And at that moment, she seemed to understand exactly what was happening. "Mom," whispered Lily, "that man isn't well." Amanda looked at her daughter, then at Richard. The businessman was pale, his hands visibly shaking, For a moment she felt a twinge of satisfaction seeing him so vulnerable. But then, something in his gaze disturbed her. It wasn't just physical discomfort she saw there. It was something deeper, more painful. It was the look of someone who had just awakened to a terrible truth. Father Anthony approached quickly, supporting Richard before he fell again. Amanda took a step forward, driven by an impulse she didn't even understand herself. But before she could do or say anything, Richard broke free from the priest and staggered toward the exit, disappearing into the night that was beginning to fall. "Let's go home, honey," said Amanda, gently pulling Lily along. But as they walked across the main square, she couldn't help thinking about Richard Mitchell's disturbed look. Something had changed in him. She could feel it. And that change, for some reason she didn't yet understand, filled her with an unsettling premonition. The night had barely begun, but Richard Mitchell was already emptying his third glass of whiskey, sitting alone in his penthouse office. The city, lights twinkled through the panoramic windows, like artificial stars witnessing his anguish. On the mahogany desk, important documents awaited his signature. $1 million contracts, expansion projects, the kind of decision he used to make without hesitation. Now, each paper seemed to weigh a ton. The encounter at the church had awakened, something he had spent decades trying to bury. His conscience. The images wouldn't stop spinning in his mind. Amanda's face, older but still dignified, and especially the eyes of that girl. Lily, her daughter. The child who was in her mother's womb when he, with a single signature, had condemned them both to years of suffering. His hands trembled as he poured another glass. In the reflection of the window glass, he barely recognized the man staring. Taik! Where was the unwavering confidence, the certainty of his decisions? Everything had collapsed in a matter of hours, and worst of all, he knew it was just the beginning. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Catherine, his secretary for more than 20 years. "Mr. Mitchell, sorry to bother you at this hour, but Mr. Parker is on the line. It's about the Flower District expropriation." Richard closed his eyes tightly. The Flower District, his new project, a development that would transform an old area of the city into a modern commercial complex. Hundreds of families would have to be removed, but the profits would compensate for any social inconvenience. That's what his legal department called it. "Tell him I'll call back tomorrow," he replied, his voice hoarse. "But sir, the deadline for signing the contract expires at midnight. Mr. Parker said that—" "I said tomorrow," he thundered, slamming the phone down hard. Silence returned to dominate the office, but now it was different. It was an accusing silence, loaded with the voices of all those he had harmed over the years. How many Amandas had there been? How many Lilies had their lives altered by his decisions? He stood up, staggering, and walked to the filing cabinet on the wall. With trembling fingers, he pulled out an old folder, yellowed by time. It was the closure process for the store where Amanda worked. Page after page of cold numbers, technical reports, market analyses. Nowhere was there mention of the faces, the lives behind those numbers. A sob escaped his throat. For the first time in decades, Richard Mitchell cried. He cried for Amanda, for Lily, for everyone he had hurt. He cried for the person he had become, for the monster he had built in the name of success. The sound of rain beginning to fall brought him back to reality. He needed to do something. He needed to fix things, even if it was impossible to undo all the harm caused. With determined, though still unsteady steps, he went to his desk and began frantically writing on a notepad. Hours passed as he worked, making calculations, listing names, searching his memory for each person he had harmed. The whiskey bottle remained forgotten, replaced by cups of strong coffee. When the sun began to rise, it tinged the sky blood red, as if nature itself reflected his agony. His cell phone vibrated. It was a message from his lawyer, reminding him of the board meeting that morning. Important decisions would be made, new projects would be approved, business as usual. But Richard knew nothing would be usual in his life anymore. He looked at the pages he had written during the night. A plan was beginning to take shape, something that would change everything, something that might perhaps redeem him. But there was a price to pay, a price few would be willing to accept. The intercom buzzed. Catherine had arrived for another day of work. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. The driver is waiting to take you to the board meeting." Richard looked once more at the city he had helped transform, at the empire he had built on tears and destroyed dreams. His decision was made. "Catherine, cancel all my appointments, and please call Dr. Sanders. I need to make some urgent changes to my will." On the other end of the line, there was a moment of perplexed silence. "Sir, is everything all right?" "No. Catherine, it's not, but perhaps for the first time in a very long time it might be." As he hung up the intercom, Richard didn't know that his words were more prophetic than he imagined. In a few hours, his life would change completely, and with it, the lives of many other people. The man everyone knew as the ruthless Richard Mitchell was about to disappear forever. In the small craft store, Amanda was organizing the shelves while trying to push away memories of the previous night. The doorbell chimed softly, announcing the arrival of her first customer of the day. To her surprise, it was Catherine, Richard Mitchell's secretary. "Good morning," said Catherine, her tense face revealing that this wasn't a casual visit. "Can we talk in private?" Amanda instinctively looked at Lily, who was doing her homework in a corner of the store. Since they had returned to town, the girl rarely left her mother's side, as if afraid something might separate them. "Lily, sweetheart, can you go upstairs for a moment? I need to talk to this lady." The girl hesitated, her perceptive eyes studying the visitor before silently obeying. Only when she heard her daughter's footsteps on the floor above did Amanda indicate a chair for Catherine. "What does Richard Mitchell want from me?" she asked directly, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years of resentment. Catherine nervously fidgeted with her purse, removing a brown envelope. "Actually, Amanda, may I call you that? Mr. Mitchell doesn't know. I'm here, and after what happened this morning, I thought you needed to know." Amanda's heart raced. What happened? He came to the office distraught, different from anything I've seen in these 20 years working with him. He cancelled all appointments, called his lawyer, and then began doing something impressive. Catherine opened the envelope, revealing a series of documents. "He's undoing everything." Amanda took the papers with trembling hands. They were contracts, deeds, financial documents. On each one, Richard Mitchell's elegant signature transferred properties, shares, resources. "He's donating practically his entire fortune," explained Catherine. "To charities, to former employees, to families he harmed over the years. And there's something more." She hesitated, pulling out a specific document. "He created an educational fund in your daughter's name." Amanda felt her blood freeze. "How did he?" "He knows, Amanda. After the church, he spent the entire night investigating, discovering what happened to you after you left town. The fund has enough resources to guarantee Lily's education through graduate school at any university in the world." Tears began to roll down Amanda's face. They weren't tears of gratitude, they were of anger, of indignation. Does he think he can buy forgiveness? That he can erase 15 years of suffering with money? Catherine sadly shook her head. "No, Amanda, he knows he can't. That's why he's doing something even more radical." She handed over one last document. "He's renouncing everything. He's going to hand over control of the companies to an administrative board with the condition that no employee be fired for the next 10 years, and then he's leaving." "Leaving to where?" Nobody knows. He just said he needs to find a path to redemption and that he can't do it here, surrounded by everything he built on the pain of others." Amanda remained silent, absorbing this information. Upstairs, she could hear Lily's soft footsteps, probably concerned about the long conversation. "Why are you telling me all this?" she finally asked. Catherine sighed deeply. "Because in 20 years I've never seen Mr. Mitchell cry. This morning, when he looked at your daughter's photo, he cried like a child. He asked me to ensure that you two would be okay, even if he could never personally ask for forgiveness." The doorbell chimed again. This time it was Father Anthony entering the store, his normally serene face marked with concern. "Amanda," he said, still breathless, "I need to talk to you. It's about Richard Mitchell. He just did something amazing at the church." Catherine and Amanda exchanged tense looks. What else could Richard Mitchell have done? The answer was about to change not only their lives, but the entire history of that small town. Father Anthony sat heavily in one of the store chairs, while Catherine served a glass of water with trembling hands. The morning sun streamed through the glass windows, creating restless shadows over the displayed crafts. In the tense silence that settled, even the birds outside seemed to have fallen silent. "He appeared at the church early," the priest began, his normally firm voice now faltering. "He was different from the man we saw yesterday. His eyes, there was something in them I can't explain. Peace and torment at the same time." Amanda sat down as well, her legs weakening with anticipation. The priest continued. Richard knelt in the same place where he had fainted the night before. He stayed there motionless for almost an hour. When he finally stood up, he took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. "For the roof repair," he said. "I thought it would be a small donation, like so many others we receive." The priest paused, passing his hand over his wrinkled face. "But it wasn't just a donation, Amanda. It was the deed to a property. The land where the old store stood, the one where you worked, and with it was a complete project to transform it into a community center with vocational school, daycare, clinic, all already approved by the city council, with resources guaranteed for 10 years of operation." Catherine let out a muffled exclamation. That land was the crown jewel of Richard's business, valued in the millions. The shopping center project that would be built there had been his obsession for the past few months. "There's more," continued the priest. "He left a letter to be read at Sunday Mass, a public confession of all his mistakes, of all the people he harmed, and a request for forgiveness that—" The religious man's voice broke. "In 40 years of priesthood, I've never read such sincere words of repentance." Amanda rose abruptly, walking to the window. Her reflection in the glass showed a pale, troubled face. For 15 years, she had fueled her strength with the anger she felt toward Richard Mitchell. That man had destroyed her life, forced her to start from scratch, caused endless nights of worry and despair. And now he simply decided to redeem himself? "It's not fair," she murmured, more to herself than to the others. "It's not fair that he can clear his conscience like this, with grand gestures." "Mom?" All heads turned to the staircase. Lily was standing there, observing the scene with her deep and unsettling eyes. Those same eyes that had disturbed Richard so much in the church. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," said Amanda, trying to smile. "Just adult matters." But Lily slowly descended the steps, her young face carrying an expression of understanding that went beyond her years. "It's about the man from the church, isn't it? The one who was suffering so much." Father Anthony looked at the girl with curiosity. "How do you know he was suffering, little one?" "I saw it in his eyes," Lily answered. "Simply, like I see it in my mother's eyes now. It's the same kind of pain, only different. His is because of what he did. Hers is because of what she suffered." A heavy silence fell over the store. Catherine wiped away a discreet tear. The priest lowered his head, as if deeply meditating on the child's words. Amanda felt her legs weaken again and needed to lean on the counter. How could her daughter, her little Lily, understand with such clarity something that even she couldn't fully process? "There's one more thing," said Catherine, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled. "Before leaving the office this morning, Mr. Mitchell gave me this." She took a small, black-covered notebook from her purse. "It's his diary. He started writing it last night after the church. He said I should give it to you, Amanda, when I thought the time was right." Amanda looked at the notebook as if it was something dangerous, explosive. Lily approached her, holding her hand tightly. "He wrote here," continued Catherine, opening the diary to a marked page, "that there are secrets that need to be revealed, things that happened 15 years ago, that go beyond your dismissal. Things he never had the courage to tell anyone." The doorbell chimed once more. A man in a suit hurriedly entered the store, his face red with concern. "Father Anthony." "Catherine, thank God I found you. I just received the news. Richard Mitchell has been in an accident." The hospital corridor at St. Luke's was immersed in tense silence. Amanda remained seated in one of the plastic chairs, Richard Mitchell's, diary weighing on her lap like lead. Beside her, Lily slept against her shoulder, exhausted after hours of waiting. At the other end of the corridor, Catherine paced back and forth, occasionally stopping to answer calls on her cell phone. The accident had been apparently simple. Richard lost control of his car upon leaving the church, crashing into a tree. But the doctors were concerned about his heart condition. Tests revealed he had been suffering from a severe arrhythmia, probably aggravated by the stress of recent days. Amanda couldn't explain why she was there. After so many years nurturing resentment, it would be natural to simply ignore that man's fate. But something kept her in that antiseptic corridor, something beyond curiosity about the contents of the diary in her lap. "Mrs. Smith?" The nurse's gentle voice brought her back to reality. "Mr. Mitchell is asking for you." Amanda looked at Lily, hesitant. Catherine quickly approached. "I'll stay with her. Go." The private room was spacious and quiet, except for the constant beep of cardiac monitors. Richard was reclining in bed, paler and more fragile than she had ever imagined seeing him. His eyes, however, maintained an intense gleam. "Amanda," his voice was just a whisper. "You came." She remained near the door, holding the diary tightly against her chest. "Why did you call for me?" "Because I need you to know the truth. All of it." He gestured toward the diary. "Have you read it yet?" "No." "Please read it now. I need to see your eyes when you discover it." With trembling fingers, Amanda opened the diary to the marked page. As she read, her face lost all color. The words danced before her eyes like venomous snakes. March 15th, 2009. Today I discovered something that will change everything. Melissa came to my office with irrefutable evidence of fraud in the expansion contracts. Documents showing how we diverted money, how we bribed inspectors, how we destroyed lives. Amanda Bennett Smith was right about the irregularities at the store. That's why I needed to silence her. The dismissal was just the beginning. I used my contacts to ensure she would never get another job in town. I couldn't risk her discovering more, talking to the wrong people. Melissa threatened to report me, said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. Tomorrow she's going to the police. I can't allow... Amanda raised her eyes, horrified. Melissa had been her best friend, the only one who stood by her after the dismissal. She mysteriously disappeared a few days later, leaving only a note saying she needed to start over somewhere else. "What did you do to her?" Amanda's voice trembled with anger and fear. Richard closed his eyes, tears streaming down his aged face. "I threatened her, told her I would destroy her reputation, ruin her family. She fled that same night, terrified. I never knew where she went, if she's alive or..." His voice failed. "For 15 years, he continued after a moment, I carried this secret. I convinced myself I had done what was necessary to protect my empire. But yesterday, when I saw your daughter in the church, those eyes, it was as if Melissa was staring at me again, judging me through time." The cardiac monitor began emitting faster beeps. Richard twisted in the bed, his face contorted with pain. "There's more," he gasped. "In the diary, the last page. What really happened to your husband?" Before he could finish, a series of alarms began to sound. Nurses rushed into the room, pushing Amanda out. The last thing she saw was Richard's face, his lips moving silently, forming words she couldn't understand. In the corridor, Lily had awakened and was standing, staring fixedly at the door of the room. Catherine held her hand, but the girl seemed strangely calm amid the chaos. "Mum," she said when Amanda approached, "there's something on the last page of the diary, something about Dad." Amanda looked at her daughter, then at the diary in her hands. With a mixture of fear and determination, she turned the pages until she reached the end. What she found there made her world completely collapse. The words on the last page of the diary were like stabs to her heart. Amanda needed to lean against the corridor wall as she read, her legs trembling uncontrollably. The truth kept for 15 years finally came to light. Final confession. The accident that killed David Smith was no accident. He discovered the frauds, threatened to expose everything. I paid to have the brakes of his car tampered with. I destroyed not only his life, but also that of the woman he loved and the daughter she carried in her womb. This is my greatest sin, one that not all the money in the world can atone for." The diary slipped from her trembling hands, falling to the floor with a dull thud. Her David had not died in a common accident as everyone thought. He had been murdered, and the man responsible was there, a few meters from her, fighting for his own life. Lily approached silently, picking up the diary from the floor. Her eyes scanned the words quickly, an understanding beyond her years reflected in her young face. "That's why you cried every night, isn't it, Mom?" she asked softly. "You always knew something was wrong." Amanda embraced her daughter tightly, letting the tears flow freely. Yes, she had always known. In her heart, she had always felt that David's death had not been a simple accident, but hearing the confirmation after so many years. The hospital corridor was suddenly filled with intense commotion. Doctors and nurses rushed into Richard's room carrying emergency equipment. Catherine, who was observing everything from afar, approached Amanda with a pale face. "His heart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's very weak." For long minutes, chaos reigned in the corridor. The sound of the defibrillator echoed through the door, along with urgent voices giving medical orders. Amanda remained motionless, holding Lily close to her, a whirlwind of contradictory emotions in her chest. Finally, a doctor emerged from the room, his face grave. "We managed to stabilize him, but the situation is critical. The next few hours will be decisive." "Is he going to die?" asked Lily, her clear voice cutting through the tense silence. The doctor looked at the girl, surprised by the direct question. "We're doing everything we can, little one." "No," said Lily with a disconcerting certainty. "He can't die yet. There are more things he needs to tell. Isn't that right, Mom?" Amanda felt a shiver run down her spine. How could her daughter know? How could she sense that there were more secrets buried in this story? Catherine approached, holding a new envelope she had just taken from her purse. "He gave me this morning, before the accident. He said I should only deliver it if something happened to him." Her hands trembled as she extended the envelope to Amanda. "They're documents about Melissa." Amanda took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a series of old papers, receipts for bank transfers, bus tickets, phone call records, and an address handwritten in Richard's elegant handwriting, 237 Acacia Street, Pine Valley. "Melissa is alive," murmured Catherine. "Richard helped her flee, gave her money to start a new life. But guilt consumed him all these years. He monitored her from a distance, ensuring she was safe, but never had the courage to face her." Lily took the paper with the address, her eyes shining with a peculiar intensity. "We need to go there, Mom. We need to find Aunt Melissa." Amanda looked at her daughter, then at the room where Richard was fighting for his life, and finally at the address in her hands. 15 years of lies. Secrets and pain were beginning to unravel like an endless skein, and at the center of it all, an even greater truth waited to be discovered. "Catherine," she said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know she still possessed, "I need you to take care of the store for a few days. Lily and I are going on a trip." At that moment, the machines in Richard's room began to beep again. Once more, the medical team rushed to his aid, but this time something was different. Something in the air, in the expression of the professionals, in the silence that followed. Amanda held Lily's hand tightly. The path to truth was just beginning, and she knew deep in her heart that the most painful revelations were yet to come. The journey to Pine Valley was silent. Amanda drove focused on the winding road, while Lily observed the landscape through the window of the rented car. The mountains rose imposingly around them, like guardians of long-buried secrets. They had left town in a hurry, after receiving news that Richard had fallen into a coma. The address led them to a modest house on the outskirts of the tourist town. It was a simple construction, with a well-kept small garden and lace curtains in the windows. Amanda parked the car and spent a few minutes just looking at the house, her heart beating erratically. "She's home," Lily said softly. "I can see someone through the window. Amanda took a deep breath and got out of the car. Each step to the door seemed to last an eternity. Before she could ring the doorbell, the door opened. There, standing at the threshold, was Melissa. 15. Years had passed, but Amanda would recognize her anywhere. The same gentle face now marked by some wrinkles, the same kind brown eyes, though carrying a deep sadness. "I knew one day you would find me," said Melissa, her voice choked. "Since I learned what happened to Richard, I've been waiting for this visit." The two women looked at each other in silence for a long moment, decades of untold history floating between them. It was Lily who broke the moment, stepping forward. "You look just like the photo my mom keeps in her drawer," she said, surprising both Amanda and Melissa. Melissa invited them in. The house was cozy inside, with walls covered in pictures and photographs. But what caught Amanda's attention was one in particular, herself, 15 years younger, embracing Melissa and David, all smiling at the camera. "You knew," said Amanda, her voice trembling. "You knew about David's murder." Melissa indicated the sofa for them to sit. Her hands trembled slightly as she served water in crystal glasses. "Yes, I knew. And I carried this secret like a cross all these years. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you run away?" Melissa sat heavily in an armchair. "Because Richard didn't give me a choice. He had evidence. Evidence that could posthumously incriminate David, destroy his memory. Documents that linked him to the company's frauds." "But David was innocent," protested Amanda. "Yes, he was," Melissa replied softly. "But Richard had fabricated such convincing evidence that no one would believe otherwise. He threatened to use this evidence if I said anything. Said he would turn David into a criminal in everyone's eyes, including yours, Amanda. I couldn't allow that." Lily, who had remained silent, approached Melissa. "You also had something that belonged to my father, didn't you?" Melissa looked surprised at the girl, then at Amanda. "How can she know that?" "Lily has a special gift for perceiving things," replied Amanda, also intrigued by her daughter's insight. Melissa rose slowly and walked to an old chest in the corner of the room. From inside it, she removed an envelope yellowed by time. "Your father gave me this on the day he died. Said it was insurance in case something happened to him." Amanda took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and an old flash drive. "David discovered something much bigger than simple contract frauds," explained Melissa. "Something that involved powerful people, far beyond Richard Mitchell. He gathered all the evidence on this flash drive." "And why didn't you use this evidence all these years?" "Because Richard wasn't the only one threatening me, Amanda. There were others. So even more dangerous people, people who..." A noise at the front door interrupted the conversation. Melissa turned pale. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, approaching the living room. "Quick!" whispered Melissa, pushing Amanda and Lily toward a side door. "You need to get out of here, now!" "But..." "There's no time for explanations. Take my car in the back." "Garage. The keys are hanging by the door. Go to the St. Francis Hotel in the center of town. Room 304. There you'll find the rest of the answers." Lily held her mother's hand tightly. "Let's go, Mom. She's right. We can't stay here." As they were pushed out of the house, Amanda could still see, through the reflection in a mirror, a man in a dark suit entering the living room. His face was strangely familiar to her, someone she had seen many times in company meetings 15 years ago. Already in Melissa's car, driving at high speed on the dirt road, Amanda realized they were diving deeper and deeper into a mystery that went far beyond Richard Mitchell and his confession. The truth about David's death, she now understood, was just the tip of a much darker and more dangerous iceberg. The St. Francis Hotel was an old building in the historic center of Pine Valley. Amanda and Lily climbed the stairs in silence, the envelope and flash drive safely kept in her purse. The third-floor corridor was deserted, illuminated only by the weak light entering through the old windows. Before room 304, Amanda hesitated. Her hands were trembling so much she could barely hold the key that Melissa had discreetly placed in the envelope. Lily held her hand, transmitting a calmness that seemed improbable in someone so young. "It's all right, Mom," she whispered. "Whatever." We find in there, we'll face it together. The room was simple but clean and organized. On the desk was an old laptop, apparently left there purposefully. Amanda connected the flash drive with trembling fingers. The screen flickered, revealing dozens of folders with dates from 15 years ago. "My God," murmured Amanda as she opened the files. David was investigating much more than simple contract frauds. He discovered a giant money laundering scheme. The Mars. Documents revealed a complex network of shell companies, all connected not only to Richard Mitchell, but to important figures in the town. Politicians, businessmen, judges, a web of corruption that extended far beyond what anyone could imagine. "Look at this, Mom," said Lily, pointing to a specific folder. "It has Aunt Melissa's name here." Inside the folder was a video file. Amanda clicked on it with her heart pounding. The shaky image showed a meeting in an elegant room. Richard Mitchell was there, younger, along with other men in suits. Among them, Amanda recognized the man who had arrived at Melissa's house. "August Pine," she whispered, the former head of the legal department. In the video, they openly discussed bribes, forged documents, threats. Melissa appeared briefly, serving coffee apparently unnoticed by those present. David must have hidden a camera somewhere in the room. That's why she was able to escape, Amanda understood. Melissa had a copy of this evidence. They couldn't do anything against her without exposing themselves. A noise in the corridor made them both freeze. Heavy footsteps were approaching. Amanda quickly removed the flash drive and stored it, along with the letter they still hadn't read. The doorknob turned slowly. Lily reacted with surprising quickness, pulling her mother to the bathroom. They had barely closed the door when they heard someone enter the room. Through the crack under the door, they could see shadows moving. Male voices whispered, ransacking the room in search of something. Amanda covered Lily's mouth with her hand, although the girl remained strangely calm. "It's not here," said a hoarse voice. "The old woman must have given it somewhere else." "The boss isn't going to like this at all," replied another voice. "We'll have to follow the woman and the girl. They must have picked up something at Melissa's house." The men left, closing the door forcefully. Amanda waited a few minutes before daring to leave the bathroom. The room was in disarray. Drawers open, mattress out of place. "We need to get out of here," she said, grabbing her purse. "It's not safe." "Wait, Mom," Lily stopped her. "The letter. We need to read Dad's letter first." Amanda looked nervously at the door, then at her daughter. Those eyes, so similar to David's, stared at her with an intensity impossible to ignore. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. "My beloved Amanda, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me. What I've discovered is too big, too dangerous. But there's something even more important that you need to know. Something about our family, about secrets buried long ago." A new noise in the corridor interrupted the reading. This time there were several pairs of footsteps rapidly approaching. Amanda hurriedly folded the letter and stored it along with the flash drive. She took Lily by the hand and ran to the window. The fire escape was old, but it would have to do. "Hold on tight to me, honey," she whispered, helping Lily climb onto the windowsill. As they hastily descended the rusty metal staircase, Amanda could hear the door of the room being broken open above them. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky blood red. The secrets contained in David's letter would have to wait. Now the most important thing was to stay alive. Night had fallen over Pine Valley when Amanda and Lily finally found refuge in a small inn on the outskirts of town. The room was simple but cozy, heated by an old heater that hummed softly in the corner. Amanda locked the door and checked the windows twice before finally allowing herself to breathe. Lily sat on the bed, hugging her knees. There was no fear in her eyes, only a serene determination that continued to surprise her mother. "Can we read the rest of the letter now?" Amanda took the crumpled letter from her purse, carefully smoothing it on the small table in the room. Her hands trembled as she resumed reading from where they had stopped. "Something about our family, about secrets buried long ago. Amanda, what I discovered doesn't just involve corruption and dirty money. It involves your own history, your own family. Your father, Andrew Bennett, didn't die in an accident as you've always believed. He was silenced, just as they are trying to silence me now. He worked in the same scheme, I discovered, but decided to report everything. The night he died, he was on his way to the district attorney's office with evidence. Richard Mitchell was just a pawn in a much bigger game. The real people responsible are the Pines, yes, August Pine's family. But there's more, my love. Your mother didn't run away and abandon you as you think. She too was a victim. She discovered the truth about your father's death and tried to seek justice. She was threatened and forced to disappear to protect you. Melissa knows where she is. It was your mother who organized the entire protection scheme, using Melissa as an intermediary all these years. She never stopped trying to protect you, even if from afar. If something happens to me, look for the necklace, the one with the half-moon pendant that your mother always wore. Melissa has kept it all these years. Inside it, there's a key, and that key opens. The rest of the letter was stained, the words blurred and illegible. Amanda let the paper fall, her legs weakening. Lily quickly supported her, guiding her to the bed. My mother, whispered Amanda, tears streaming down her face. All these years, I thought she had abandoned us. Grandma is alive, said Lily softly, and she never stopped loving you. Dai! Soft knock on the door made them both freeze. Then a familiar voice. Amanda, Lily, it's me, Melissa. Amanda opened the door cautiously. Melissa entered quickly, closing the door behind her. She was breathless and seemed frightened. How did you find us? Asked Amanda. Your mother, replied Melissa, taking something from her pocket. She always knew this day would come. That's why she gave me this. It was the necklace mentioned in the letter, a delicate half-moon pendant in aged silver. Melissa handed it to Amanda with trembling hands. Inside it is the key to Helen's last hiding place, said Melissa. Your mother kept all the evidence there, waiting for the right moment. Now, with Richard in a coma and his confession coming to light, we can finally expose everything. Where is she? Asked Amanda, her voice choked. In a convent in the mountains 2 hours from here. The nuns have protected her all these years. She never stopped watching you from afar, Amanda. She was present at every important moment in your life, even if you didn't know it. Lily took the necklace from her mother's trembling hands, examining it carefully. With small, skilled fingers, she found the secret mechanism that opened the pendant. From inside fell a tiny golden key. Melissa looked nervously out the window. We don't have much time. August Pine already knows you have the evidence. He won't stop until... The sound of tires screeching outside interrupted her. Headlights illuminated the room through the thin curtains. Quick, said Melissa, running to the back door. We have to reach Helen before they do. Amanda held Lily's hand tightly as they followed Melissa into the night. The necklace swung at her neck, the small golden key holding the final secret of a story that had begun much longer ago than she had imagined. St. Clair's convent emerged through the mist like an ancient fortress, its grey stone walls standing out against the dark sky. Amanda, Lily, and Melissa arrived breathless after an hour of walking along secondary trails, avoiding the main roads. Melissa's cell phone had picked up a worrying message. Richard Mitchell had awakened from his coma and was delirious repeatedly, mentioning the name Helen. Sister Mary, an elderly nun with kind eyes, received them at the side gate. Helen warned us you would come, she whispered, quickly guiding them through silent corridors. She has been waiting for this moment for so long. Amanda felt her heart beating stronger with each step. 15 years. 15 years believing her mother had abandoned them, and all this time she had been here, hidden, protecting them from afar. Finally, they reached a small side chapel. A woman was kneeling before the altar, her black habit blending with the shadows. When she turned, Amanda felt her legs weaken. Helen Bennett had aged, her hair now completely white, but her eyes, those same eyes that Lily had inherited, remained alive and penetrating. My daughter, whispered Helen, her voice trembling. Finally. Amanda remained paralyzed, a whirlwind of emotions preventing her from moving. It was Lily who took the first step, approaching her grandmother with naturalness. I always knew you were watching us, said the girl, surprising everyone. At my 7th birthday party, there was a nun at the back of the church. It was you, wasn't it? Helen nodded, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. You've always been special, Lily. You have the same gift your grandfather had, to see beyond appearances. Mother, Amanda finally found her voice. Why? Why did you let us believe? Because it was the only way to keep you safe, interrupted Helen, taking a rosary from her pocket. It wasn't an ordinary rosary. It was made of dark wooden beads, each one hollow. The evidence your father gathered, the evidence that cost him his life. I divided it and hid it here, one piece in each bead. But the final proof, the most important one, needed a special key. Lily took the necklace from her mother's neck and handed it to her grandmother. Helen took the small golden key and with trembling fingers opened a secret compartment in the crucifix of the rosary. From inside, she removed a tiny microchip. Here it is, she said. The original recording of the meeting where they decided to kill your father, where August Pine and his accomplices planned everything, including how to blame Richard Mitchell if anything went wrong. Melissa, who was observing the scene from the door, suddenly became tense. Someone's coming. Through the chapel windows, they could see car lights approaching the convent. Quick, said Helen, handing the rosary and microchip to Amanda. You need to leave here. There's a secret passage in the crypt that leads to... No, interrupted Amanda, holding her mother's hand tightly. I'm not leaving you behind. Not again. Mom, said Lily, her voice calm but firm. We don't need to run anymore. It's time to face the truth. The car lights illuminated the chapel windows. Male voices could be heard outside, but something had changed in the air. The tension of fear gave way to a strange sense of peace. Helen looked at her granddaughter with admiration. You're right, little one. We've run for too long. The chapel. Door opened. August Pine entered, accompanied by two men. But before he could say anything, another figure appeared behind him. It was Richard Mitchell. It's over, August, said Richard, his voice weak but determined. I've already confessed everything to the police, and I'm no longer willing to carry the weight of your crimes alone. The small chapel of St. Clare's Convent, which had served as a refuge for secrets for so many years, now witnessed the moment, when all truths came to light. Richard Mitchell, still pale and visibly debilitated, leaned against the doorframe as federal officers silently entered, surrounding August Pine and his men. Have you lost your mind, Richard? Growled August, his face red with fury. After everything we've done for you? No, replied Richard, his voice gaining strength. For the first time in many years I'm thinking clearly, and the only madness was having allowed this weight to consume me for so long. Helen stepped forward, her eyes fixed on August. 15 years, she said, her voice trembling with contained emotion. 15 years waiting for this moment. You took my husband from me. You forced me to abandon my daughter. You destroyed entire families in the name of your power and greed. August tried to move toward her, but was restrained by the officers. His once arrogant face now showed the desperation of a man who saw his empire crumbling. Lily, who observed everything with impressive serenity, approached Richard. You suffered a lot too, didn't you, carrying all that guilt? Richard looked at the girl, tears streaming down his aged face. Yes, little one. But do you know what finally made me find courage? Your eyes. That night in the church, I saw in your eyes the same kindness I used to see in your grandfather's eyes. Andrew was a good man, a man of integrity, and I allowed them to kill him. I allowed them to destroy his family. Amanda, who until then had remained silent, held her daughter's hand. What happens now? It was Melissa who answered, a gentle smile on her lips. Now, my friend, the real journey of healing begins. In the months that followed, the small town of Riverdale witnessed a profound transformation. The corruption scheme was completely dismantled. August Pine and his accomplices were arrested. The companies underwent restructuring, now under new management, with policies that prioritized employee well-being. Richard Mitchell fulfilled his promise. His entire fortune was redistributed, creating foundations that helped needy families. The old store property was transformed into a thriving community center where Amanda now coordinated support programs for women in vulnerable situations. Helen left the convent, but not her faith. She moved to a small house near Amanda and Lily's, where she could finally be the mother and grandmother she had always dreamed of being. The nights of solitude and regret gave way to family dinners, laughter, and the building of new memories. Lily grew up being known in town not only as the girl who helped uncover a conspiracy, but as someone who had a special gift for understanding and comforting people. As her grandmother said, she had inherited not only the eyes but also the kind heart of her grandfather. On an autumn afternoon, a year after the events in the chapel, Amanda found her daughter sitting on a church pew in the same place where that whole story had begun. "What are you thinking about, dear?" she asked, sitting beside the girl. "You know, Mum," replied Lily, her eyes shining with that wisdom that always surprised everyone. "Sometimes people need to completely lose themselves to find their way back home. Like Mr. Mitchell, like Grandma, like you." Amanda embraced her daughter, feeling deep gratitude. The pain hadn't completely disappeared. Some wounds leave scars that never fully fade. But now there was also healing, forgiveness, and, above, all the certainty that no secret is strong enough to resist the power of love and truth. At the church exit, they met Richard Mitchell. He was different, thinner, simpler in his clothes, but his eyes had a gleam of peace they never had in the days of power. He smiled timidly at them, a smile that carried both repentance and gratitude. Lily took her mother's hand, and together they walked toward the sunset. The church bell rang softly as it had rung on that first night, but now its sound didn't announce the beginning of a mystery, but rather the celebration of a new beginning. Because sometimes all structures need to collapse so we can build something, new and true upon the ruins of the past. And in that small town where a story of pain and secrets had begun, a new story now flourished, a story of redemption, forgiveness, and above all, love.